Every console out there has games that become well known for different reasons. Sometimes they're iconic for being some of the best on the console, and other times they're iconic for being, well, kinda shit. But what about those games that were just downright weird? Now, if you're familiar with my channel, then you'd probably be able to guess that this is my favorite thing to explore. So I set out on a mission to find some of the strangest official games the PSP has to offer, see what they're like and if they're actually even worth giving a shot. Now there's a lot of strange games out there on every platform and the PSP is no exception, but just because a game is weird doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, and that's what we'll be trying to get to the bottom of here today. There's a big list of these, but I narrowed it down to a few pretty different types of games for today. Ones that have weird stories, gameplay, concepts, or all the above. So let's get into it and look at some of the weirdest PSP games out there. If you've ever wondered what would happen if you took Fallout's Robo-Brain and Nick Valentine and put them into a blender, yeah, me either, but you'd probably get something like this. Deadhead Fredin is an action-adventure game from 2007 developed by Vicious Cycle Software, who are mainly known for their work making some licensed games throughout the 2000s. So the game follows a private investigator named Fred Newman who is trying to solve his own murder. Yes, his own murder, because, he doesn't have a goddamn head.
What the fuck?
The mad scientist Friedrich Steiner, who Frankensteined your ass back together, gives you the rundown and it's off to get some revenge. It's got this 1940s film noir detective tone to its setting with a fair amount of dark humor mixed in. The character designs are pretty whimsical and cartoony in a lot of ways, and kinda reminds me of the Chicago level from Timesplitters 2. Now as for the gameplay, it's mostly your standard action-adventure beat-em-up sort of deal, except you don't really get any weapons here, and that's where the unique part of the game comes in. Instead, you rely on the powers you can get by swapping between the 9 different heads you can collect in the game. How do you collect them? Well, you rip off the enemy's head and jam it into the little brain jar thingy, and there you go. Now, I have no idea who the hell came up with this stuff, but hey, I'm all for it. I didn't expect much from this game before I played it, but honestly, it's pretty damn hilarious across the board. Not just because of its weird-ass concept and style, but it's actually got some pretty funny dialogue too, with John C. McGinley being the voice of the main character.
You've got about 2 seconds before I rip off your head and make us identical twins. Now where is my friggin' head?
The game actually ended up winning the Writers Guild of America's first ever award for video game writing back in 2007, which is pretty crazy to think about. Aside from the whole head transplant mechanic, the gameplay is pretty by the book as far as action-adventure goes, but I don't really think that's a bad thing. You work your way through various locations, beating the piss out of mob henchmen, zombies, and whatever other creature they came up with here. It wasn't super popular, but it had some pretty positive reviews, especially for its setting and writing. But there was never any continuation of the IP. The developer shut down in 2016, and there hasn't really been any word about it since. It's not deep, but it's got some pretty funny gameplay with good humor packed in. I actually kinda got carried away and ended up sinking a lot more time into it than I thought, and I actually really enjoyed myself. As for the verdict on Deadhead Fred, I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10 on the weirdness scale. The strange concept, characters, and dialogue are really what sells it for me here. Overall, I'd give the game itself another solid 9 out of 10. Even though the gameplay is a little by the books, I think it's good enough, and I would even say this one is a bit of a hidden gem for the PSP that I don't hear many people talk about. Now we've got WTF, also known as...
What the fuck?
Or just work time fun. Now I had heard this one was kinda weird, but I had no idea just how weird it would actually be. The basis of work time fun is that you're just a regular, everyday, average Joe trying to make some money by doing a bunch of odd jobs, which come in the form of different mini-games you can choose from. You enter some general information, like name, date of birth, and address like you would for any normal job application. Then you can access the main menu, where you can check your mail, use a vending machine, or pick a job from the job demon. You know, it all sounds like pretty normal stuff here. Well, at least until you get into the minigames themselves. There's 4 different jobs you can choose to make some money in the beginning. The first one involves you keeping track of the people that cross the street. Okay, a little boring, but fine. Another job has you crossing the street and avoiding traffic. Alright. After that, you have the job of catching baseballs. Okay, easy enough. Now if you're noticing a pattern here, you'd be right. All of these involve basic menial tasks that end up paying pretty much nothing in the end. It's like the game was made for the sole purpose of gaslighting Reddit's anti-work community. The amount of money made is based on how long you last in the minigame. But how long you last doesn't depend so much on skill or critical thinking, but rather how long you can actually tolerate it before going postal because it's so tedious. The best possible example of this is the fourth and final starting job, which, I shit you not, is to put the caps on pens. I think this one was a bit on the nose here. It's got this desaturated background image of what looks like a depressing assembly line factory in China, and the counter in the bottom goes up to a total of whatever the hell this number is. The only way to unlock the better paying jobs is to grind your way through these lower tier ones first. Oh boy, that sounds like a lot of fun. Now the whole idea of mocking the stereotypical monotony of unskilled low-level employment is kinda comical, so the game is funny. The problem is, it's not very fun. I have no idea who thought this would have made for a good game that you actually have to pay for. And the weirdest part is that this isn't just some homebrew project or flash game. This was actually developed by none other than Sony themselves.
The fuck?
Now what do you do with the money? Well, you pump it into the vending machine, of course, which can either unlock those new minigames or give you a random novelty reward. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's a gachapon machine. This is basically a portable gacha game before the concept took over every app store out there. I really don't know what more to say here. It's a funny experience for just how strange and satirical the whole thing is, but again, it's a terrible idea for an actual game, and the reviews it got definitely reflected that. It seems like Sony focused so much time into making this game comical that they completely forgot to make it, actually enjoyable. I'm gonna give this one a solid 10 out of 10 weird as hell for the strange idea alone. And that same strange idea is why I'm also gonna give it a generous 5 out of 10 for having gameplay that is so boring it made me want to laugh and stab a fork in my eye at the same time. Which is the only example I can think of where I'd be doing both of those things. So nowadays, vehicular combat games focus more on military-esque armored vehicles, things like mech warriors or World of Tanks. Which brings us to today's sponsor. I'm kidding. But back in the day, the genre was a little bit different. And a perfect example of this on the PSP was Pursuit Force from 2006. You play as a cop in, well, the Pursuit Force, an elite police unit that was formed to deal with the local rise in vehicular-based crimes from 3 different gangs across the very creatively named capital state. Now if you think that sounds like the plot of a Hot Wheels spin-off movie from the early 2000s, I totally wouldn't argue with you. But that's okay, because unsurprisingly the story pretty much takes a backseat the entire time to make way for the gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, it's spread out over a bunch of different missions that usually involve starting in some sort of chase with one of the gangs. You follow after them, smashing, shooting, and hopefully getting close enough to hop over and hijack the suspect's vehicle. Oh yeah, no handcuffs here either. The Pursuit Force just straight up executes these gang members. Most of the missions take place on the road with cars or bikes, but there are certain segments where you'll be in a boat, on foot, or even in a goddamn helicopter. Now it actually sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on here for a PSP game, but it's all mostly on rails. You speed up to the suspect, and from there, most of what happens is kind of automated other than you picking when to shoot and take cover, which really is just spamming buttons. It's like a series of QuickTime events. The way I'm describing it kind of sounds a little disappointing, but this system probably was a good idea for a platform like the PSP. With so much shit going on at once, I think offering more control might have made it a bit too complicated to keep up with sometimes. Between all the driving, shooting, and hopping between cars, it's pretty much constant chaos, which kinda checks out as the developer, Big Studios, were also behind MotorStorm Arctic Edge. Does anybody remember Ride to Hell Retribution? Yeah, that janky motorcycle racing game that was less about actually racing and more about beating the absolute piss out of your opponents? Yeah, what can I say? It was shit. Well, seeing the cover of Pursuit Force kinda made me feel like that's what I was going to be in for with this game, and I'm kinda glad I was wrong about that. Pursuit Force isn't exactly anything to write home about here. The gameplay is okay and all. I think the most of the appeal of the game comes from just how dumb it is, and I kinda mean that in a good way. The really goofy ass plot and dialogue mixed in with the action being so over the top unbelievable is kinda what made the game for me here. It wasn't like I kept playing because I was so invested in the story. It was mainly because I wanted to see if the next mission would somehow end up being even more excessive than the last. At the end of the day, Pursuit Force isn't exactly winning any awards here, but again, the unintentional comedic value is kind of what sells it for me. It would get a sequel a few years later with the subtitle Extreme Justice, which oddly enough would be re-released for the PS4 and PS5 as part of Sony's Classics catalog. I'd give Pursuit Force a 7 out of 10 on the weirdness scale. Not the strangest title out there, but still worth mentioning due to its stupidly high-octane action. As for the gameplay itself, 7 out of 10. Despite being a bit of fun, it can get old pretty quick. But the amount of unironic stupidity packed in here still made it a fun one to check out. So, I went from doing mobile head transplants to jumping between cars in highway traffic, all the way to the most depressingly accurate life simulator I've ever played. So I think that's enough weird shit for today. But there's a lot more in store that I was able to dig up here. So let me know in the comments if you want me to take a look at more of these strange-ass games. Just as long as it doesn't involve me capping pens for the rest of my life.